When the first South American Pope was elected in 2013, I was lucky enough to have a front row seat.
The white smoke absolutely billowing out of the chimney. The scream went up. Pope Francesco, Cardinal Bergoglio, the first from South America.
Sono andati a prenderlo quasi alla fine del mondo, ma siamo qui.
Francesco! Francesco!
When he was first elected, I was so excited. Here was a man who had a heart that was close to the people.
13 years on, has he lived up to that excitement and promise of change?
People who have not been seen in the past, he's really looking at them and he's saying, I see you. And you have a role to play in the life and mission of the church.
All are a nation.
What people have really welcomed about Pope Francis is the level of natural personal engagement.
And where has he failed?
Pope Francis has a patchy record on child sex abuse within the Catholic Church.
So what are the strengths and weaknesses of this Pope? Does he have a distinct vision? And all those tensions between the progressives and the conservatives in the church, has he aggravated them or reconciled them? And for believers like me, and the world in general, what will be his legacy?
At 87 years of age, and despite bouts of serious illness, Pope Francis has just completed his longest overseas trip yet to our region. Here in Southeast Asia, he is adored.
I hope our Pope give peace, unity.
Once again, he's determined to honour his commitment to marginalised communities, the peripheries, a priority very evident from the earliest days of his papacy. In his very first year as Pope, Francis headed straight to the tiny Italian island of Lampedusa to bless refugees who'd arrived by dangerous sea crossing. This Pope has been called a disruptor. Early on, in an effort to shake up the old established order, he appointed new cardinals in unexpected places to recognise and prioritise the Church in the developing world. Pope Francis seems to have emphasised a different type of bishop or cardinal.
I think this is a major shift within Catholicism.
Dr. Paul Collins is an acclaimed historian and specialist on the popes.
There's a cardinal in Dili. There's a cardinal in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. He has certainly shifted the church to the peripheries.
Francis himself was born far from Rome, in Argentina. Born George Bergoglio, he studied to become a Jesuit priest and quickly rose to lead the Jesuits there. During the Dirty War of the 1970s, he was accused of failing to protect two Jesuit liberation theology priests who were tortured by the regime. He was ultimately cleared, but the controversy surrounding his actions remained. Later, as Bishop of Buenos Aires, he became known as a man of the people, living modestly, catching public transport. And he's brought this approach to Rome, where he continues to live far more simply than previous popes.
And this movement towards walking together, journeying together, it really calls every single baptized person. You know, when we went to World Youth Day, he said, todos, 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 everyone, everyone's included.
Since he became Pope, the Catholic Church has grown throughout the world, especially in Asia and Africa. But in the West, the sexual abuse crisis has left deep, ongoing scars, affecting the Church's reputation and numbers, something very evident to those of us who remain committed. In Australia, the census tells us Catholics are now just 20% of the population, diminishing many parishes.
But there are some exceptions, like the Diocese of Parramatta in Sydney's west.
You know, we have the mix of cultures, we have the mix of backgrounds from all walks of life, one of the highest populations of migrants and refugees and asylum seekers.
All right, can everybody sing?
But we're also quite young, and so that really influences the spirit of our community here, one that's joyful and creative, and the dreamers here in the Diocese of Parramatta.
Quayne and Sebastian organise informal activities to attract younger people.
We can get up to over 200 young people at some of these events, at gatherings, retreats or concert-like events that we organise, or sports days. And they are hungry to be involved. It may not just look like how it's always been within the confines of parish walls.
Young people have also been attracted by the Pope's strong stance on climate action. In 2015, he urged all humans to care for the Earth rather than dominate it.
If you've moved in the environmental movement, one of the things that you often experience is the number of young people who come from a Catholic or a Christian school background. They don't go to Mass on Sunday, they don't say regular prayers, they have a much freer approach to their personal and sexual lives than my generation, but they do understand a couple of the cores of Catholicism and Christianity, that is social justice and care for the environment. They understand that.
In 2022, Pope Francis issued an historic apology to First Nations peoples in Canada for the Catholic Church's catastrophic policies there in Indigenous residential schools.
I am here asking forgiveness, telling you that I am deeply sorry for the ways in which, regrettably, many Christians supported the colonising mentality that oppressed the Indigenous peoples.
On the issue of First Nations here in Australia, however, one glaring absence is the ongoing lack of Indigenous Catholic priests. But it's the scandal of clerical sexual abuse that remains the biggest crisis the Catholic Church has faced in centuries.
A Catholic priest was raping them when this photo was taken this age. And that's why we've been fighting for so long. We need the whole weight of the Church put behind helping these victims and ensuring it doesn't happen again. That's what we need.
In Australia, the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Sex Abuse exposed systemic crime and corruption within religious and secular organisations. From 2012, Francis Sullivan led the Catholic Church's response to the Royal Commission.
It is vital that the culture of a church that enabled the abuse of privilege and power that led to the crimes and cover-up be confronted head-on.
Pope Francis has a patchy record on child sex abuse within the Catholic Church.
He really had no comprehension of the impact of sexual abuse when he became Pope.
He should have, surely.
He should have, surely.
In 2020, the Vatican sanctioned a prominent Timorese bishop following sexual abuse allegations. A year earlier, a defrocked American priest was jailed for abusing girls in Timor.
The victims of sexual violence, right now, it's not a public secret anymore. It's been protected because the Catholic Church was part of the resistance. We would like this progressive Pope to take a stand with the victims, to do a formal apology, to hug the victims.
He seemed to have a bit of a tin ear. He wasn't picking up the fact that the voices of victims were being drowned out by the justifications of the clergy. It always wants to believe its own. And Francis, unfortunately, had that attitude in Chile for a long time.
It certainly had arisen in Chile. He grasped it there. He saw the impact of it.
Eventually.
Eventually.
He eventually dragged all the bishops from Chile to Rome, but that was really only when his personal image was taking a hit.
Later, Francis accepted the resignation of 7 of these bishops for their role in the cover-up of sexual abuse. So what's been the fallout in Australia? Shane McKinley is the Catholic Bishop of Sandhurst in Victoria.
Hello.
He's a key leader in Australian church reform.
Wouldn't you say that that whole crisis had led to terrific distrust and falling away and dismay?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The growing awareness of the extent to which young people, other vulnerable people, had been so damaged by the appalling things that were done to them by people they had every right to trust in. Representatives of God, representatives of the church. There's a great undermining of the extent in which there's community trust and confidence in the church and in those who are involved with the church.
You would think that something that's the worst thing to happen in the history of the Catholic Church in Australia, the United States, Germany, Ireland, England, Holland, Malaysia, Africa, New Zealand, we haven't enough time to name all the countries. You would think that that should be the driving issue, because what it does is it lays bare the toxic culture within our church. And if we were prepared to really examine that culture and why it exists and how it could be remedied, we would be talking about a church renewed.
The Pope's approach to sharing his thoughts can surprise, like his impromptu press conferences on planes. During his first one, he signalled a very new approach to LGBTQI people, including gay priests.
Se una persona è gay e cerca il Signore e ha buona volontà, ma chi sono io per giudicarla?
That was such a refreshing thing for him to say, and it was very life-giving to a lot of people I know who thought, at last.
I think he's listened to a lot of stories. I think what's resonating in his heart is the anxieties and the pain of people who have felt left out.
How many people fail to approach us or keep their distance because they feel unwelcomed and unloved, regarded with suspicion and judged?
Pope Francis tells us explicitly that this church isn't a museum of saints, but it's a field hospital for everyone. And he tells us explicitly that this church is supposed to be for everyone. So look around, who's not here? Let's bring them in. Let's make this a home for them too.
The Pope released a teaching that everyone can have a blessing, including LGBTQI and divorced people. This announcement highlighted deep divisions about Catholic tradition, sparking anger in some regions, while others rejoiced.
I gather you're a bit of a pen pal of the Pope.
I am, yes, very happy to be.
Sister Janine Gramick is a leading Catholic LGBTQI advocate, based in America, but in regular contact with the Pope.
Do you think he is shifting fundamentally on issues of LGBTQ people in the church or not?
Yes, and I think he is changing his views, or has changed his views on LGBT people because he has met them. I know that when he was in South America, in Buenos Aires, he had friends who were gay.
The Pope has taken a very pastoral approach to issues of LGBTQ. How would you say that has played out?
I think it's been enormously positive and encouraging. It's consistent with the way that Pope Francis would respond to the situation of any person. Is he responds to them and encounters them as the person that they are, in all of their richness, in all of their particularity, as a beloved son or daughter of God. At the same time, he's not suggesting that doctrine should be shifted in terms of the particular sacramental character of the marriage between men and women.
The Pope has allowed the blessing of same-sex couples, but not their legal marriages in church. It seems the risk of political agitation, the culture wars, worries him.
The church seems like it balks at the hurdle called human sexuality. And this is such a consistent issue that continues to alienate people and communities.
Pope Francis is prepared to let people be people, but he doesn't like it accompanied by an ideology. Why do you think he's making that distinction?
I don't know why he's making the distinction, but I think the distinction is not helpful. Everyone has an ideology. You could say my faith is an ideology.
Do you think he thinks it's about politics rather than belief, and he's suspicious of it?
Oh, I do. I think he thinks it's very much about politics.
On the issue of transgender rights, the Pope has embraced trans individuals, but the most recent Vatican statement on human dignity condemns all gender-affirming surgeries.
And that hurts people. And it hurts people because genuine people are trying to live genuine lives, God-given lives. And they don't need some hectoring from an institution that somehow seems to imply that their life is wrong. The one thing the church shouldn't be doing is saying there's no room here. There's no room at this inn. That's not a faith response. That's running a culture war.
Embracing such diversity can highlight weaknesses and promote division. In the highly polarised US, some conservative bishops have publicly opposed the Pope, arguing their view defends doctrinal purity, which to them he undermines.
Many of the US bishops could form their own branch of the Republican Party and be done with it. And many of them are actually strong supporters of Trump. And abortion, the church's identification with the anti-abortion stance denies the emphasis of Pope Francis on the pastoral, because he's saying the church is a field hospital, it's not some type of ideological factory.
What really distinguishes his papacy are his dogged efforts to rebalance the local churches versus the centre, the Vatican, in this multinational giant. In a break with convention, Francis is urging that his teachings be interpreted at a local level in an effort to accommodate different cultures and progressive and conservative forces.
For instance, in relation to the way LGBTQ and so on might be welcome, but the way that that might be articulated and expressed, that perhaps that needs to be and could helpfully be articulated in different ways in different cultures around the world.
This is revolutionary, isn't it, for the Catholic Church?
Well, we say we are both absolutely local and absolutely universal. And how we do that is a whole lot of tensions and compromises. Tension can be life-giving and constructive. Unity does not mean uniformity. The extent to which there's diversity within the Catholic Church is surprising for those of us who are part of it and who have grown up thinking that Catholic means everything's the same.
It's this church that is a worldwide and global thing that tries a lot of different ways to cater to so many different cultures and so many different places and so many different people, that tries to be everything to everyone, and that's not an easy job to do.
And then there's the vital issue of women, assigning them positions of authority, not merely service or just sitting in the pews. Now, one obvious answer was to ordain women as deacons, which used to happen in the early church. But in a TV interview earlier this year, Pope Francis emphatically ruled that out, which came as a big shock to many of us.
He definitely wants the participation of women. He appreciates the contributions of women. However, he still thinks there is a distinctive path or role of a woman that's different from the path or role of a male. And that's, I think, the reason why he not yet can accept women priests or women deacons.
Currently, our church does not have an equal place for women in the church. Until women are able to make decisions at the same levels of men as priests and bishops, then we live in an unequal situation.
I don't think he's done enough around the inclusion of women. I mean, he has run into a brick wall. The reactionary groups in the church who, for some reason, don't want to open their eyes and realise that if you talk about men and women being equal, then men and women need to participate equally.
He certainly doesn't appear to feel that women have got a role in a ministerial sense, in an ordained sense.
I don't know. I'm still trying to work out where his thinking is going in this. One of the things that he does not like is he hates being backed into a corner.
And you're fatalistic about that.
Not fatalistic, but I'm used to it. The Catholic Church doesn't rush into things, but has extraordinary capacity for resourcefulness and for surprise and for new possibilities.
We've got women who are at the senior level of governance of Catholic universities. We've got women who are chairing some of the biggest hospital groups in Australia, taking on major canonical stewardship roles. They're running the show, and it's prospering. And so ordinary Catholics are very comfortable with women in leadership. And I suppose it is an example of where maybe the clerical caste has got the problem. The rest of us don't have the problem.
Hand in hand with his localising efforts, what Pope Francis has really emphasised is overturning the hierarchical nature of the Catholic Church.
Now, this Sacred Heart Cathedral is a simply beautiful building, grand and majestic. The sort of cathedrals I grew up with, although I was in a parish church. But we all knew our place. So the priests and the clergy sat up there, we sat down here. Everybody knew where you sat. That's the sort of thing that Pope Francis has been trying to change fundamentally.
In the past, a Vatican synod was a meeting of bishops only, top down, very hierarchical. For the first time ever, this Pope included women and lay people as voting members of the most recent synod meeting.
The past synod illustrated how people with diverse views expressed them, and there was a lot of disagreement, but people listened. That's the first step in our metanoia, in our changing, but it takes a long time.
What I think Francis is trying to do is to create that consultative church. He wants the church to speak. He wants the bishops to speak. But part of the problem that he faces with it immediately is that so many of the bishops are appointees of his predecessors, and the people who were appointed by his predecessors were, one would have to say with the greatest respect, not men who are much talented in the leadership sphere.
The bishops as a whole are a timid lot. I mean, I think the best litmus test has been how slow the bishops were in really getting to the front foot on the refugee crisis. Anytime anything sounds like it could be political, whatever that means, they run a mile. And I think in lots of ways the bishops of Australia are confused about their role in the public square. I think they're intimidated by politicians. Their media strategy is to work every way they can to not be in the media.
Well, can this troubled church, after so many terrible stories, really offer anything to its believers and others? Well, it is slowly learning to listen to each other respectfully. And in a polarised world like ours, I wonder whether that is the really big gift on offer. The sorts of changes in culture that Pope Francis has instituted, are they robust? Will they stand up after he's gone?
I think a whole lot of this toothpaste is stuff you can't get back in the tube. After you've had broad participation like this, how can in any diocese a bishop say, oh, it's not workable, or in any parish, a parish priest say, oh, it's not workable, there aren't ways of having people actually concretely participating in and contributing to decision making.
I think that's where Pope Francis's gift is. He's shared this vision of the church as this synodal church, this listening church, this church that really enters into dialogue. Let's do away with the structures that divide us and allow ourselves to sit face to face.
I think what he's trying to do is shift the power relations within the church. He's trying to address what he's always termed the evils of clericalism, the top-down approach of the clergy with the rest of us. He's making it very clear that the church of the future is a church of mutuality, where the majority of Catholics, lay people, have an equal say in where the church goes.